Hi, I'm Ben Sheeran. In this short video, I'm going to tell you about the timed reading activity for the Fluency Course Level 1. Now, in some ways, the timed reading activity is the core of the course, maybe alongside the speaking activities. It's certainly one of the most important elements of the course, and so it's quite important for you to get this right and to give the students lots of chances to succeed at this activity. This activity is also probably one of the most useful for students. In Japan still, the kind of long timed passages are a core part of both the high school entrance tests and the university entrance tests. So getting good at reading things for meaning, to catch, to find the answers to questions, this is a really useful skill for junior high school students. Okay, to do the timed reading, you'll need textbooks for the students. It's quite useful if the teacher has a teacher copy, just because the answers are pre-printed in there. It makes it quite easy to run this activity. Each student will probably want to have a record sheet, if possible. We find it useful to print these on slightly thicker paper. Makes them more durable, makes them feel a bit more important to the students as well. And for our class, we use stopwatches for the activity. We have a class set of stopwatches that we hand out just before the timed reading, and we collect just after the timed reading. Students could also use their smartphone, although that does occasionally cause problems if they get distracted by notifications and so on. Or you can use the class clock. If you have a central clock, it's quite easy to use that for timed reading as well. So the timed reading activity, I'm going to talk about the basic activity first, and then we'll go on and talk about some variations after that. So the basic activity is very simple. These 2 pages in the book are not facing, they're actually front and back, and that's deliberate. For the timed reading activity, the basic activity is students start their stopwatch or start timing, read the text silently. So timed reading is generally a silent activity. They're not reading aloud. Just a quick aside, silent reading and reading aloud are quite different skills. Silent reading is faster. You're focusing more on the meaning. And reading aloud is a bit slower, and you're focusing more on the pronunciation and not so much on the meaning. So for this activity, the core activity is silent timed reading. So once they finished reading, they would stop their stopwatch, write their time in the box, and then turn to the next page. And then they would try to do the questions on the next page. Generally speaking, we encourage students not to look back at the text when they're writing their answers to the questions. So the idea is, and also they haven't seen the questions before they read the text. All of these make this a bit more challenging. So if you wanted to make it easier for your students, you could, for example, go through the questions before reading. That would make it much easier. You could also have them be able to look back at the text to find the answers. But generally speaking, we encourage our students to read, think about the meaning, remember the meaning, and then answer the questions based on that. Now, we're not too strict about it. I'm not walking around going, no, don't look at the text. But we encourage, it's kind of a challenge. Can you do it without looking at the text? And if you can't, then it's fine to look. But try to do it without looking is the general kind of atmosphere for this. So in class, we would give out the timers, have the students read the text, and then answer the questions. Once they'd finished, or once everyone's more or less finished, we'd check the answers. And I tend to check the answers by reading the question and then calling on the student to answer. And then I'll ask that student to read out the answer in English. Not just say A or B, but actually say, she is 11 years old. And then I would say, yes, that's correct. Or I'd say, no, that's not correct. And then I'd ask someone else. I think it's quite important not to put too much pressure on one student. If the student has the wrong answer, that's fine. We'll ask someone else for the correct answer. And if the second person has the wrong answer, that's great, because the first person doesn't feel so bad, and so on. So we're not going to put pressure on someone to rethink their answer on the spot. We're going to ask someone else and then ask someone else, and so on. One thing I find quite useful at this point is have some little cards with the students' names written on them. And I can use these to call on people for activities and so on, or to make pairs for the speaking activity. You can shuffle them and draw the cards. So for checking the answers, I would shuffle the cards, draw them, call on people, and then discard that card so that I wasn't going to call on the same person more than once, and so on. It makes classroom management for this a little bit smoother. You can also use the slides, the classroom slides, to check the answers. That's pretty good if you have a screen or a projector or something to do that. Or you can just check in the teacher book to make sure that the answers are correct. Once we've checked text number 1, we'd go on to text number 2, and the students would again read, answer, we'd check the answers, and then we'd go on to text number 3. So we don't do all 3 and then check, we'd check after each one as we go through. As they're working, the students will be filling in their record sheet. So as you can see on the left, on the far left, we've got the vocabulary box, and then we've got the unit 1A, 1B, 1C text boxes. And for each text, they'll write their time, they'll write their answers. So they might write A. And then when we correct, they'd go through and correct those. So if the first one was not A, but rather B, the students would cross out A and then write B in. And then they'd write their score. So 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 and so on. And basically we'd keep doing this. So basically the record sheets, they're not that important in my opinion, but I think the students find it useful to have something like this. It makes the activities feel more meaningful. And they can see their progress. A lot of students like to see, that they're getting the right scores or that their times are getting faster and so on. So I think this is a useful prop for the Fluency Course classes. Now, let's look at some variations in supplementary activities. So, for example, at the beginning, this activity will probably take a bit longer and students will find it challenging. But as they get used to it, they're going to get faster at reading and they're going to find this activity easier and easier. And you might find that they finish much more quickly than you want them to. At which point, it's useful to have some backup activities that you can use to basically take more time on the timed reading section of the class. When you do this for the first time, I often find it useful to use this first variation. So I will read the text and then the students will try to answer the questions. That's one way of making it much easier at the beginning. And then once they get used to the format, you can kind of ease back and let the students read instead of you. Another thing you can do, which we often do, is after you do the timed reading and check the answers, we'll go back to the text and the teacher can read aloud and the students can follow along and practice. Another thing is you can change this activity from a timed reading activity to a listening activity. So have the students go straight to the questions and then the teacher can read the text aloud. So the students are not reading at all, they're just listening and trying to catch the information so they can answer the questions. That's an interesting way to shake things up a little bit. You might want to do that with one text every week out of the 3. Another thing we often do is have the students read aloud after the timed reading. So we'll read the text, check the answers, and then go back to the text and then have the students one by one read one sentence or one paragraph aloud, just as a kind of practice. Another variation of that, you could put the students in pairs and have them read aloud to each other, alternating sentences. That way they can help each other if they get stuck and so on. It's a bit less pressure than reading aloud in front of everybody. You can also do things with the text, like having students copy the text or change it so that it's talking about them rather than the characters in the book. Some texts will be better for this activity than others. So there's all sorts of things you can do. And in fact, I think there's probably going to be more variations that I haven't thought of that the community is going to come up with. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. If you need more information, you can go to our website. There's a lot more resources on there. You can keep watching these videos. There's also a Facebook group, which I'm going to add to the description as well. That's a good place to ask questions. And of course, you can get in touch with me anytime. I'd love to hear from you.